From the dawn of time we came, moving silently down through the centuries, living many secret lives, struggling to reach the time of the gathering, when the few who remain will battle to the last. No one has ever known we were among you, until now.
We had our first documentary shot in May, May 9th to be exact. After we shot that documentary, some things happened. Can we go into that? What transpired after our first meeting?
Well, it's something that I've been reluctant to talk about, but I will talk about it. At least get it on the record. Bittersweet to come back and was kind of, barking and squealing and screaming. And I just ran down through here. And that's right beyond this tree, beyond this foliage. That's where it all took place.
This first tree right here.
Right beyond this evergreen tree, and these leaves. Right there, right in that open space, just beyond this tree. That's where I saw this thing killing my dog. This is the exact place where it all took place. This is the place where the obelisk was, right here, where I broke through the brush and fell against it, right here, because it was high, and there's a little valley, there's a little rut there that I didn't see because of the underbrush, and I just kind of came crashing right through there against it. It was right here. It was sitting right here. It was this high off the ground. It wasn't touching the ground. It wasn't hovering. It was just as if it was anchored to the air in place. Even 13 years later, it still feels weird to be here. It still feels sad and uncomfortable. Because my dog died. Because I was so sick. Because nothing made sense.
You know that fax I read just a few moments ago? Well, there was a follow-up. That just came in. Dear Mr. Bell, we have films of an extraterrestrial and its craft taken with a video and 35mm camera as well. The films and the story that go with them are like no other anyone has seen or heard to date. Dr. Jonathan Reed, the person that had this experience, desires to make this information known exclusively on your program first, if you are interested. Soon to be published, it is an emotional, incredibly compelling truth that's backed up with unmistakable testworthy visual evidence. The films and the accompanying story make the alien autopsy in Victor's film look sparse in comparison. Hearing the story, and I'm understanding when I say it's shocking, seeing the videos is an experience anyone interested in ufology would give nearly anything to see and hear. We feel honored and hopeful in offering you and your audience this exclusive opportunity to experience an incredible journey that continues to this day. I hope you might see this letter tonight. We have given our phone numbers below, and we will be available tonight if you'd like to call. We believe the timing of your return and Dr. Reed's decision to tell his story now is no accident. Wanna take a ride? Signed, Robert, and I won't give Robert's last name unless he wants to give it. You want to give your last name, Robert?
Absolutely.
What is your last name?
Great.
Great. Robert Great. Author of Link and Extraterrestrial Odysseys. Publishing. A lot of publishing going on here. All right. Now, the want to take a ride offer, I take it that is sort of metaphorical.
Absolutely.
So the ride would be a ride to see the crispy 35mm photographs and the films to go with. Is that correct?
Absolutely. The ride would be that and the incredible story that it surrounds.
Describe to me what's on film and what's on video and how clear it is.
Well, first off, the video and the pictures are incredibly clear. It's not black and white, not all foggy and confused. They are very clear.
Very clear.
Very, very clear.
As clear as, for example, the Billy Meyer photographs.
As clear.
As clear.
You can't mistake what you're looking at for anything other than it is.
All right, I'll take your word on that. Let's see, where to begin? A million questions. Where did this experience occur?
This experience occurred in Washington, state of Washington. In the forest. A gentleman, Dr. Reed, was hiking through the woods.
Dr. Jonathan Reed. What kind of doctor is he?
He's a psychologist.
Psychologist, all right.
He was hiking through the woods with his dog when he lost track of his dog. And what happened was he began to hear that she was in some kind of fight or conflict.
Right.
So he moved to find out where she was. Well, when he found her, she was attacking this creature. And this creature was an alien.
Can you give us some sketchy idea of what this creature looked like?
The creature is childlike in dimensions, but it has a large head. It has large dark eyes. I guess it doesn't look like the classical gray. For one thing, it has very distinct features. It looks very old. It has long, thin arms and long, thin legs.
Okay, I think I get the picture. And the craft?
The craft looks like a Marquise diamond. It's a large black thing we call the obelisk.
The obelisk.
And what we have are photographs of it hovering. And they're very clear.
You have photographs of it hovering?
And we have video.
And video.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
My name is Jonathan Reed. Tonight I'd like to offer you my version of show and tell. I'll show you what I saw and I'll tell you a little bit about it. And at the end we can talk about it. I'd like to, at this time, thank a couple of special people who have helped me to come here tonight and who have invited me to let you hear what's happened to me. Terry and Bob Brown have got me here safe and given me the opportunity to tell you what happened to me and let you judge for yourself. And that's all I've ever asked to do. You see it with your own eyes. You judge it for yourself. And you decide how it affects you. First, I'd like to ask you a question. How many of you in the audience have heard my story? Thank you. Those of you who haven't, I will try my best to recap some of the event in a moment. Oh, and before we start, I have one other question. How many of you are currently working or have worked for any member of our government or any other? Let's see a show of hands. Well, to some of you who aren't raising your hand, and I know of 3 of you that are here, I have one thing to say to you folks. And that is, I'm here in spite of your actions, in spite of trying to keeping me from talking about this. And I will tell my story, no matter what. We're here to stay. Tonight I'm here to talk about the event that happened prior to what you just saw on the video that happened some 3.5 years ago when I was with my dog, Susie, and I encountered a strange creature. The video that you've just seen was taken out of sheer desperation, exhaustion, and plain fear. At this time, and at that time, I was almost in a total state of emotional breakdown. I had been through what I now feel is the closest thing to hell possible, just short of death. I had taken my dog for a hike in the mountains of the Pacific Northwest in Washington State, some 60 miles east of Seattle and 15 miles northeast of Snoqualmie Pass. I parked my car, and my dog and I walked into the woods approximately for an hour and a half. During this hour and a half, we walked by trees and streams and mountains that were very familiar. I'd done this many times. Nothing unusual. But all of a sudden, my dog decided to take off running after something. Again, not an unusual thing. The woods are full of raccoons and squirrels and deer. We'd seen one earlier in the day. This time it was different. My dog took off like a bolt of lightning and was barking, and I lost her out of sight. She ran up ahead. I don't know how far. There were hills and a lot of brush. And the barking got more fierce, and I was sure that she was in some kind of conflict with either a bear or a cat. I wasn't sure. I threw my backpack down, and I grabbed a branch just in case I could throw it or defend her off of something, and I ran to the top of the ridge. And when I was at the top of the ridge, I saw something that defied everything that I have ever seen. I saw my dog in what I thought was attacking something else. And at the time, at the first moment, I thought it was a child because it was childlike in size. My dog had this thing by the arm, and they were in some kind of mortal conflict. As I watched, moment, second to second, I watched my dog being torn in half in front of my eyes. I saw her head split in half, with her jaw torn back across her back, and her life being torn apart in front of me. I called for her to let go. But she couldn't let go because something had a hold of her. And this thing was vibrating so fast that I could barely make out the outline. But it was 2 arms and 2 legs and a head, but like nothing I had ever seen before. And all of a sudden, Susie started to fold in on herself, her body literally creasing into herself. And she fell to the ground and basically died in front of my eyes. I screamed as loud as I could for her to let go. But she was gone. And I ran forward as this thing looked at me. And I took that branch and I hit it as hard as I could. And it screamed, and so did I. I'm defending my dog.
I'd like to ask what you would have done. I've heard a lot of popular prattling and posturing about, well, I would have done this and I would have done that. Well, that's baloney. Be there first. Experience it firsthand. And I damn well can tell you, you will react completely differently. And anybody that's been in any real serious situation knows this to be the truth. We all like to believe that we would act in a rational, controlled manner. But when something like this incredible, this horrific occurs, you just can't. Your mind can't handle it. We're not used to this. And for Dr. Reed, he had never even dreamt to even begin to think he would see something like this. He lived a different life at a different time, like myself. And so when he saw this, how else could he have reacted?
I ask you, what would you have done? What would you have felt? Put yourself in my shoes for a minute. This happened within 20 to 30 seconds. And some say, that's a pretty short amount of time. I say it was an eternity. And I've had to replay this over and over in my mind ever since. I'd like to apologize for my language in the video, but I was sick, I was frustrated because of what I was seeing in the camera lens. Of all times for my video camera to quit working, I was furious. And then I just did what I had to do. I kept shooting, hoping something would be recorded, something that I could decide later on if I had any sanity left. Because everything that I had prior to this moment was gone. All of my logic was gone. Nothing seemed real or right anymore. As I filmed the video, I noticed that it would distort the closer that I got to the black obelisk, which I have taken to call it. And I realized that the farther away I got, the less distortion would happen. So I ran back as far as I could and tried to record something. After taking the video, I ran back to my pack and I took my 35mm camera out and I took pictures of everything at the site. I have some of those pictures here and we can look at those now. Some of these are out of focus so that you believe they're real. Because as I have been told, if they're too sharp, they're obviously not real. Again, this is the obelisk from a long distance. It was 9 feet by 2.5 by about 3.5 or 4 feet wide. It had 6 sides, 6 definite sides. It was made out of something that felt like granite or marble. It was hard like stone, and it was cold like dry ice, because eventually I did go up and touch it. People have said, oh, these pictures have been manipulated. Well, what you're looking at is not a digital copy. These are 35mm slides. These are the originals. You can see the definite definition between the sides and the top and the bottom. This, in my mind, after thinking about this for a long time, I don't necessarily call this a ship or a craft, but possibly a toolbox, possibly a container for something. I don't know. I don't have those answers. Some people have stated that this possibly could have been an entry point and an exit, possibly a biomorphic gate to transfer from one dimension to another.
Some members of the Alliance have stated that they felt that it might be, the reason when Jonathan touched it, it wouldn't move, is because it's actually anchored to 2 points at the same time, here and the home world or wherever that is. So it's actually in 2 places at the same time. You can't move it. It won't budge.
The negatives or the slides of this have been looked at and verified to have not been digitally manipulated by more than one source out of my hands, independent of me.
Art Bell was one. I imagine most people here know Art Bell. So Art Bell was one, Eastman Kodak was the other.
This is a pretty good example of what I saw. To give you an idea of how I came across this thing, after I knocked the creature down, I became instantly violently sick. So sick that I could not control all of my bodily functions. I had diarrhea, I had nausea. I couldn't stand for more than about 5 or 6 minutes at the most without falling to the ground. I did my best to try to regain some kind of strength, some kind of composure, but again, the sickness would come and overtake me, and I would lay on the ground, unable to move, unable to get up. Some people have said, well, why didn't you just run away? I couldn't. I could not move. I laid there for probably more than an hour trying to move in a 10-foot circle where I had no ability to stand. I would stand and I would fall down. At one point I stood and I fell and I tore my shirt against a tree. And then I began to hear a sound that was like a harmonic coming from somewhere out there. At first I thought, oh, it's a hiker, it's another hiker, it's a camper. They can help me. And I needed help. And I listened and I stood up and I tried to find where that sound was coming from. And it was an irritating sound, almost a low ebb harmonic sound. And I would walk and I would listen, and then I couldn't hear it any longer, and I'd get frustrated, and I'd get sick, and I'd get angry. I had to keep in the moment. I had to think of things like, can I take the next step without falling down? Can I survive the next 5 minutes? At one point, I didn't know if this was reality or not. And I would stand up and count my fingers to keep telling myself that yes, this wasn't a dream and I was still functioning somewhat. After a few moments, I heard the sound again, and again I crawled toward what I heard and what I thought was hopefully some help. And through the trees I saw what looked like a mirage. I saw the trees and the light bend just slightly. But this was unusual because it was an overcast day. But that's where the sound was coming from. And so I went through the brush, waiting, hoping somebody would be there. And I went down the hill and over the rise, and I saw this black thing. And it wasn't help. And I looked at it, and I fell against it. And the cold from the surface burned my hand as if it was dry ice. And it was hard, and it was cold, but I felt like there was some other presence there. Like it wasn't just a cold piece of stone. Like there was some kind of consciousness that I can't explain. I looked around and I noticed this thing was not touching the ground. And I got sick. And I couldn't move. And I was angry because this didn't fit into my world. And I questioned my sanity, as I do now and have ever since. But I know I wasn't insane, and I'm not now. And I know what I saw, and it was there.
Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction, and I think everybody here should be pretty comfortable with that.
To sum up what happened, what I call the event, I then tried to regain strength as much as I could, because I knew I had to get out of this area, because it was going to get dark. When this happened, it was 2:55 in the afternoon on an October day. It gets fairly dark fast in Seattle. I didn't know if I could move 100 feet, yet an hour back to my car. And I walked back to my pack, and I drank some water, and I sat there trying to calm down, trying to keep from getting sick, moment by moment. Every step of the way, I kept saying, one small step. I can do this. One small step. And then I remembered I had my camera. And what you saw is what I took. And I didn't know if any of it would come out. But it did, and I'm glad it did. And if I was insane about what I was seeing, then now so are all of you. And I took the pictures, and I calmed down, and then I thought about, what do I do with this thing that I killed? That I didn't know what it was. And I thought about hiding it from the world, because I felt that I had done a terrible thing on one hand, because I'm not a violent person. Then I thought about preserving it, maybe bringing somebody back to help me. I thought about dragging it over and burying it so that animals wouldn't get it. Well, I didn't have a shovel. I had a knife. And the terrain in this area was extremely rocky and hard. I thought maybe I could take the thermal blanket that I had in my pack and cover it up and cover it with stones or branches to at least keep it away from some of the animals in the area. So I got the thermal blanket out and I laid it on the ground and I pushed this thing into the blanket. And then I wrapped it up and I started to drag it with the straps from my pack over to the hillside. And when I did that, I realized it was very, very light. So light I could hardly believe it. And I thought, there's no place to put it here. I'll find a place, and I'll start dragging it back down the hill. And I started to walk, dragging this thing with me. And I never found a place to put it until I got back to where my Jeep was. And I walked over to my Jeep and I threw it back in the back end of my Jeep and I closed the door. And I got in my Jeep and I sat in the driver's seat and looked over where my dog sat. And thought, this can't be happening. This is not part of my life, my world. It had to be something else. This never happened. This was an illusion. Then I looked in the rearview mirror and I could see what was wrapped up in the thermal blanket. And I knew then that I had witnessed something a little strange. And I drove home. And I stopped at a ranger station to get help. There was no one there. I don't know if it was late in the season or if he was out to McDonald's, but he wasn't there. At that point, I got home. I drove in my driveway. I sat there for some time thinking, what am I going to do? Are they going to put me in jail for killing something? Someone? Because I had no idea what it was. And my mind was not very rational at the time. I went in the house. I tried to calm down. I tried to call my girlfriend. I left messages. They weren't home. I called my best friend, Gary. Left a message for him. He wasn't home. Please call me. I need some help. And I sat in my house, pacing and being sick and trying to calm down and trying to clean myself up for hours until I had to go back out and look again. And I dragged this thing back into my house because I was sure that what I had inside that blanket was my dog. That my mind had somehow made this illusion. And I took it out of the freezer in my garage. I opened it up, and it wasn't my dog. And I took it inside my house, and I grabbed the video camera from the pack, and I photographed it. And we have that video, and we can play that now. As you can see, I'm not really the professional videographer here. big burrito. Feet. Actually, it's 20 feet, but I think you're talking about what they say. Those of you who have commented and said there is no body shot, take a good look. Question.
You're going to find out in a little while.
Pinkish, bluish, gray, which later changed to a brownish pinkish. Small. Don't know. Didn't make love to it.
You couldn't tell from the examination.
The clothing was all black. It had the texture of almost a spandex-type material, but with a wet surface, almost a moist surface. Very unusual, very clinging. The eye pupils were grayish with pink and gray spots surrounding the pupil. Were covered with the same material that the body was. They were continuous glove-like hands covering, but they had 5 fingers or digits inside each. This is the video that Art Bell has in his possession, along with the one in the woods. Skin texture was like that of a pig, very coarse and dense, not quite as elastic as ours. and it smelled like rotting fruit. Kind of a grayish, pinkish brown. This is the wound, approximately 1.5 inches by 1 inch. Piece of the skull connected to the skin with a skin flap. Intercranial material was exposed. Color of the blood was red or dark cherry red, very similar to ours. Yeah, it could be a good ad for a decongestant. I'm holding the camera. They're my hands.
And part of the breathing is contributed to the fact that he was still extremely sick from what had happened earlier.
That was a joke. He had a camera taped onto a ladder, and he was moving the body in the perimeter of the camera. He was using both hands. Those are his hands to take the gloves. Someone made the suggestion that he filmed it and did this autopsy. That means he had 4 hands.
In regard to the feet, it had shoes that were also part of the same material. No definition line between, but the density of the fabric was totally different than it was on the rest of the body. It was hard and I could not feel any toes through it. Feet were very small, the arms were very long, the hands were very big. It was about 4.5 feet in length, and it weighed about 50 pounds. And again, there is the full body. Bony. Okay. Now, in regard to this piece of video, people have pointed out many details, and to give a little bit more detailed discussion about something that wasn't quite obvious to me in the video, I'd like to introduce you to a good friend, Cole Larson, who has come forward today to show you something that only I saw yesterday, and it's quite interesting. Can we run the Cole Larson video, please?
This particular video clip I made.
Just get closer.
Is that better? I made this video after Jonathan and I and my 2 sisters watched this in my sister's living room up in Seattle about a month ago, and my sisters were very persistent in claiming that the creature was blinking. So in an effort to see if that was the case, I produced this little video using some software I have, I took the video sequence where the creature is blinking and extracted that from the video and put it on my computer. And this is the original video sequence as Jonathan recorded it. And then I play it again and I mark those two blinking sequences. So keep your eye on the creature's eyes here. Right here. And so watch the eye here. There's two different sequences where it blinks. That was the second one. And I'm going to repeat this whole thing in the next segment of the video again so that you can see it. And then I mark the segments with the little green text at the top as the creature is blinking. And I'll try and point that out. And I'll try and point that out again as with the laser here as it's happening.
So essentially what Cole is defining is that this thing was playing possum on me when I thought it was dead.
Now, when I study this, I've sat and studied this little clip for hours. I also think I can pick up a little head movement when it's blinking there. As you can see it here. It's blink sequence 1. And then there may be a little mouth motion as well. But there's definitely some head motion in this one. Okay. So the next part of this tape, what I did is I took each of those two sequences, extracted them out, and then I ran them at 1/10 speed. Essentially, I duplicated the frames 10 times for each frame so that we could watch it in very slow motion. This is sequence 1, and here you can see the eye here again. This is this video that I took this from is many generations downstream from the original, so there's a lot of distortion in here you can see. But it's still, that reflection cannot be caused by the camera motion because it happens, well, I'm not an expert, but it would seem to me that if it was just light being reflected, that it wouldn't happen so many times in the same amount of time. Close, and I think that's, yeah, one more time here. It's starting to get more obvious when you see it in slow motion like that. And this is the next sequence. This one is actually a little more clear. He was closer to the head. It's a little shorter sequence. The first one is 6 seconds of blinking, and the second one is only about 4.5 seconds. And again, when I look at this endlessly, it seems like he's almost surprised. That's the feeling I get from the way he blinks here. There's just a little shake of the head, and it's almost like he's becoming aware at this point. And right here is where Jonathan starts to move in front of him. And I think this is where he's deciding that he's going to clam up and play dead. I think he's aware that this is happening. That's my feeling. You have to decide for yourself. Again, in an attempt to help me decide, I took these two sequences and I did them over and over again. I did repetition so that I could get used to seeing the sequence over and over again and decide, kind of get a feel for what's happening there. And so I do these kind of monotonous, but it does get your eye acclimated. You're expecting something each time, and I think you get a better feel for what's actually going on there. No, when we saw it in my sister's living room, he still thought it was a reflection as he was moving about. And I showed him this tape yesterday, and I think he's as surprised as you are. I haven't discerned any pattern yet.
I checked the mouth when I did this video and later in another closer examination. And for my recollection, I thought it was dead. When I pulled the eyelid down, I just pushed the bottom of the lid back in position because it stayed open a little bit.
And then after this series of repetitions, I was able to, even though the video is poor quality, I zoomed in as much as I felt was reasonable on that eye area, and I managed to make that area of zooming kind of centered on the head. And so this is blink sequence 1. I slowed it down a little bit here. There's the eye here. And the next one is the most compelling one for me because I think I see an actual eyelid motion here on the last blink. This one. And that's, I think Freddie was alive and active and playing possum.
Thank you, Cole.
Our Bell hasn't seen that yet, but when he does, I'll be sure to make sure he doesn't have a heart attack.
Can we go to the slides now? Thank you. Again, these were the wood scenes, and I'll quickly finish these, give you another little chance to look at the black obelisk. Can we turn the lights off on the stage, please? It is suspended in the air. It is anchored to the air. I could not move it. I could not budge it. I leaned against it. I pushed against it, and it would not move. It felt and sounded like a piece of stone. It almost absorbed all sound. When I touched it, the first time I touched it, the harmonic sound changed to a pleasant sound, to almost an inviting sound. No, the sound is not on the video that I can detect. Somebody asked if I had a closer photograph of it. The first one up there is within 12 feet. At another examination that I did with my friend Gary, we attempted to cut the suit, and it wouldn't allow to be cut very long. I cut the suit about 6 inches, and from the top of the cut to the bottom, it resealed itself like a zipper. I cut it a second time, it did the same thing. The third time, I stuck the X-Acto knife in, and it would not let me pull down on the material. It would not let me cut it. Yes, we did, but unfortunately, some of our dark friends have that tape. You are seeing about 15% of what I originally had. It was either stolen or taken from me one way or another. Now, I won't mention any names like MUFON, but we called a lot of people, my friend Gary and I, trying to figure out what to do, because we had no idea. We were looking for some help. And some people who identified themselves as being legitimate source people, who obviously weren't, told me they were going to help me, and that they would preserve and help me analyze some of this material. I later found out that they had no They had no part of MUFON, but I was told they were part of it at the time. My dog's body fell to the ground and became a white ash. There was nothing left of my dog. I'll try to voice the question.
We'll leave those questions until later, please. Let's get through the presentation so everybody gets to hear the story, because there is a lot more we don't have.
Again, this is a shot that I think shows you the dimensions. Definitely that this is not a pasted up piece of cardboard or a cardboard or a pixel generation.
It's actually six-sided asymmetric.
And I think you can see underneath it without any problem.
I have to bring this up. A gentleman, meaning well, looked at it and said, well, there's an anomaly here, when I had the picture downstairs. And I said, an anomaly? He goes, yes, it looks like it's floating in the air.
It is.
Thank you. That's what it's doing. You're right.
Here are the stills that I took at home, which basically you've seen in the video, but they're a little different. They're a little sharper in detail.
You can also notice the cranial ridge on the head.
Turn to the microphone.
Because there's no hair, it's easy to see where the cranial parts fit together. There was no hair.
That's simply caused by the shadow of the head.
It's either a fold in the thermal blanket or it's some of the blood that's dripping out of the back of the head. There was no hair on the body that I could find. Can we turn the stage lights off, please?
People have argued foolishly, well, there's problems with this photograph, there's not enough definition. What they've done in their infinite wisdom is take pictures off the web, which is a bad idea. If you're going to examine a photo, you don't do it like that. As you can see, all the definition is there.
No, I didn't have a flash. Here's a good picture of his headache.
You'll notice the veins coming down the neck. This shot's fairly good for that.
It wasn't paper mache. It wasn't a hamster.
One of the remarkable things about bringing something like this to you fine people is the fact that you even notice things we haven't.
Yes, I looked in the mouth. There were teeth. There was a tongue. It was grayish black, fish-like. The teeth were needle-like. Single row on top, single row on bottom. You have the stage lights, please.
Lights, please.
Thank you. So those were the pictures that I took at home that I had left. The rest are gone. The sequence of what happened was between 1 and 9 days from the time that I encountered this thing and when I no longer had control of it. It was at my house. I made arrangements for people to come and look at it, people who I trusted. From one time to another, things would change. Arrangements would be canceled for no reason. People were being threatened. We did the examination, we did a topical examination that we videotaped and we photographed in great detail. All of that information is gone. I took the information that I had from time to time and broke it into groups and sent it away to different friends of mine in fear of losing all of it.
One of the people that Jonathan sent this material to was his good friend Dolly, who he found dead.
After the 9th day, I realized I had no hope of preserving anything. When I went back and found my house torn apart and saw people going in and out of my house with dollies taking all of my possessions, I came back several hours later to my house looking like a hurricane had gone through it. Things were gone that made no sense to me. Fire files, 4-drawer fire files that weigh 700 pounds. Things that I had collected from years from school, books, papers were gone. Things were gone off the walls of all the rooms. The light switches and the sockets had been taken out and removed. They had gone through my sofa. They had gone through my sofa with some kind of instrument slashing it everywhere they could. They had removed the toilet off of the floor and left it laying aside. There were holes in the walls and the ceiling and the floor, like they were looking for something that wasn't there.
These people are very thorough. And when people ask us, you know, can you bring this person forward or that person forward, we've done enough. You know, Jonathan has done enough. He's brought as much as we can forward. We're not going to sacrifice anyone else's life.
What you don't know is the people that have helped me, have been hurt, both psychologically and physically. My friend Gary, who I thought was dead, I found after we were on the Art Bell show last time. We told everyone to let us know if they could find him. We gave out an email address. And some people emailed me. And we wrote back and we talked and we verified who they were. And I went and saw my friend Gary, who was one step away from being dead because he was beaten. He was left on a road.
This is probably the hardest point for me, because I saw him too.
Gary was a 200-pound architect who's now a mere 130-pound shell who has no desire to live any longer because of trying to protect Jonathan and what he had and not wanting any evidence or information to be released. And they use drugs on him as well.
He doesn't want me to do this. He doesn't want me to do this. But my friend Dolly and Gary, who tried to help me, are the way they are because they helped me. And that's why I'm here.
Thank you.
You know, this isn't easy. And I'm not very good at this. But somebody has got to know that this is going on. It's not the aliens that are the enemy. It's the ones that are in our own camp.
We have to stick together as a community. We've seen a lot of nations and religions and human lives devastated by division, by semantics. We have to begin to work together. This is an incredible journey we all need to make together. I've had the wonderful privilege to hear some of the speakers here, and I've learned an awful lot about a lot of things. We have to continue to do this. There are people out there that really want it to stop. And their way of doing it isn't necessarily to kill you, it's to torture you and crush you, because if they kill you, they make you a martyr. They'd rather see you destroyed.
I have tried to live my life as an American, and I believed in America. You know, I thought we had some rights, but I've seen them taken away. You know, I was happy just to do my job and drive my car and chase women. And little by little, that's all gone. Somebody said, what did you do? I worked with kids. Developmental psychology, child development. I wasn't the best student there ever was, but I worked hard. I liked what I did. I had a good job. You know, kind of the American dream. And for what? Because I wanted to get some help, because I didn't know what to do. This shouldn't happen. People know that this is going on. I've had thousands of emails since we went on the radio. People who have never seen these pictures that you have seen, that have also experienced things like this firsthand, who know this is happening, who are deathly afraid to say anything, who have been threatened and beat up, and worse. This is not the first time this has happened. This isn't about me. I'm not important. What's important is this stuff has to come out. We need to quit listening to those who say nothing is going on. We need to wake up and look with different eyes and learn that there's things that do go bump in the night that we can't explain.
I'd like to take this opportunity to read to you something, Jonathan, we could call it a dream. I think it was much more powerful than that. This was shortly after his stint in the woods. This was during the 9-day ordeal. I fell into a deep sleep. In my dream, I was drifting through a tunnel of light and pulsing energy. I could see the universe dotted with bright stars at the end of the tunnel. I began to move faster. The light and energy surrounding me blurred into indefinable colors. Sound became visible. My speed continued to accelerate. I felt myself stretch into what felt like pure energy. And before I realized it, I was out of the tunnel and somewhere else in space. I passed through gaseous clouds and protomatter. My forward motion began to slow, and the stars went from stretched bolts of light to masses of glowing energy. Soon I found myself flying over a large ball of fire. Its intensity should have blinded me. Somehow I was protected. Everything seemed so real that I never questioned my place there. I simply belonged. It was if I made this voyage every night. I passed what had to be the sun of a solar system. That's when I saw it, a planet not unlike our own, but smaller in size. How I knew this, I couldn't say. But here, information seemed to be a part of the strange journey. They were facts I had no way of knowing, data that had not been obtained through the process of learning, but somehow were bestowed upon me by means as mysterious to me as the origin of the universe. I was floating above some sort of city. Its awesome beauty was beyond anything I had ever seen. Mountains covered in purple and green, surrounded by cyclopean towers and large glass spires. Floating crystal tubes filled the azure sky. I could see clearly within them. What I saw were people who appeared to be considerably taller than ourselves. The color of their skin was bluish-gray in hue, and they all had staffs of green fire. I'll explain why it's so hard. Which seemed somehow not to burn them. I started to move towards one of the tubes in particular. I was accelerating, but not as quickly as before. I could do nothing to change my direction and was in fear that I would collide with the thing. Ahead and past the tube were pyramid-shaped buildings that seemed to collapse in on themselves, only to be whole again. Were they actually moving, or was this a trick of design? For some unknown reason, I began to feel nervous. I did not want to see what was in the tube that I was quickly approaching. The windows as I came closer were dark and tinted, but there were shadows inside, silhouettes I could not make out. Something caught my attention to the right of me. I looked and saw more of the folding pyramids, but there was something else, a large black shape, slowly moving in my direction. Or was it moving at all? Could it be that it was undulating like some living thing? The size was staggering. It was a great triangle-shaped form hovering miles above the planet. Once again I was looking straight ahead of me. Then suddenly I was thrust into the tube. I moved through the dark crystal like a dolphin through water. It felt as though there was no resistance. Inside the tube was much larger, seemed much larger than it did on the outside. Inside it was about the size of a large passenger plane. Outside it had appeared the size of a small bus. I could see two people at the far end of the tube, sitting on the cushions of energy. Moving towards them, I realized that I recognized them. It was Gary and another friend of mine, Dolly. Gary was wearing a tailored suit, Dolly blue jeans, and a sweater. Gary walked up to me and asked, "How do you like my new designs?" Then he shook my hand and said goodbye. Dolly smiled and I woke up. I saw Gary. I saw what these bastards did to him. I don't know what these corruptible fiends are thinking. As hard as this is, I'm not going to stop. I'm right alongside Jonathan. I'm not going to give up. We have to get this information out, whatever the cost. Or we're all going to live our blind little lives alone. And that's not going to happen to me.
Somebody asked what happened to Dolly. Dolly's dead. About a few months after I left town, I went underground. I decided that if no one was going to help me and everywhere I went, doors were being closed, then I had to get out of town. And I went back a few months later, called Dolly and asked her if I could come over and pick up the package that I had left with her. 3 hours went by. I went and knocked on her door, and I found her dead in her kitchen on the floor. It was later determined that she had died of natural causes. The package was gone. There was no sign of it.
Whitley Strieber once told me when I called him, and he said in a caring fashion, maybe you should just bury this, after hearing Jonathan and knowing, but then he said, I'm not saying to do this. He said, but I want you to know, the closer you are to the truth, the more adversity there will be. That's the way it works, and that is the truth.
I have sent the message out everywhere I've gone, but this will not stop with me. It's not about me. This tape is in other places, Art Bell, and a whole lot others. There have been people helping me, which I call the Alliance. From time to time, they have supported me, they have hidden me, they have clothed me. From time to time, I have lived in my car, and it's been hard. I have been run off the road. I have been chased in buildings. I have been picked up and thrown in a room and beaten up 3 times and drugged since this has happened. And for what? Because I have something that somebody wants. Because when I found this thing in the woods, I found a piece of hardware that I call the link, that I've stored away and I do not have in my personal possession, that has been photographed and looked at and analyzed and videotaped and stored, and it will be brought out. These people that I call the Alliance have stored hundreds of artifacts all over the world. Some the size of an orange, some the size of a Safeway truck. I have seen some of these things. I held one of these things in my hand. Something that looked like a tube made out of a ceramic or pottery material that rotated in half. It looked like a tube, nothing in the center. When you rotated it, air came out of one end. Almost pure oxygen, I was told. No power source, no batteries, no connections. That was found in Egypt. I saw a thing that looked the size of a truck, that looked like a big glass sculpture. It was beautiful, but it had no seams, it had no front end or back end, but it did have a little hole in the side, kind of an oval or egg shape, and inside there were 2 formed seats that probably only a child could fit in. And in that surface was embedded inside hieroglyphics, symbols that looked like Egyptian or Korean symbols, but they've never been cataloged before. They're not anything that anybody has cataloged here. They can't determine what this structure is made out of. And when it is activated, when some of these hieroglyphics are supposedly activated, it creates an anomaly from the front and the back end that reaches 10 miles in length, a magnetic distortion. This piece of hardware was found in Idaho in a mine 2 miles below the surface. No one knows what it's for. But the same hieroglyphics that are on it are on the thing I found. Can we show that video, please? This is the link artifact. It measures 3.5 inches by 4.5 inches. It is 3/16 of an inch in thickness. These are 3 of the 4, actually 4 of the hieroglyphs. The small one in the lower right-hand corner is shaped very similar to the obelisk, which is a symbol in the Egyptian hieroglyphics that indicates a door, an opening, or a form of communication. Each one of the hieroglyphs is a type of keypad, thought to be. When I had this in my possession, I placed it on the creature's arm, and it closed by itself tightly around the clothing of the creature. As it closed, it became black, like the suit, and bonded directly to the suit. By pushing the little obelisk button, it released. The material is made out of a very unusual mixture of compounds. Some we don't know. Some we do know. Beryllium, aluminum, gold, copper, manganese, bismuth. These pictures were taken in Osaka, Japan, by the people who did the analysis for the Alliance. Each angle is said to have a specific reason. One thought is that one end of it is a receiver, the other end is a transmitter. It is basically a biological and mechanical controller, thought to control something between the wearer and possibly a keeper. Could be a link, could be a leash, to keep track of the one wearing it. It is hard like steel. It couldn't be bent. It has some very unique properties to it. Under forensic X-ray examination, the interior is made of layers of material similar to a lamination. Between each lamination is a fibrous material similar to a plant fiber, suspended within an organic material. All of those layers are put together and have this overwrapping fiber that is thought to be some kind of living circuit. In a moment, you'll see the underside of this thing, which reveals 3 gold pins. Those pins are thought to penetrate the suit and the arm of the wearer, becoming a biological interface. This, in fact, would become a conscious, living connection. Some of the layers within the structure are 3 microns in thickness. A human hair is 12. The wide end is thought to be a receiving dish or end. The small notch on the opposite end is thought to be the transmitting end. Every 15 to 30 seconds, this object produces some kind of anomaly, thought to be some kind of generated source of power, creating a magnetic distortion. Very small, but constant. This is the undersurface. The material is very, very similar into what the suit was made out of that I could determine. The suit was very, very small in mesh, where this is very, very large. It was almost a fibrous, globular-looking construction. When touched, it felt moist, but yet there was no moisture on your skin. You can see the gold pins that protrude through the surface of the black material. Each one is penetrating a sphere of almost pure emerald.
Those are the 3 pins.
They are all different in length and different in dimension. When I first saw this thing, it was buried underneath a fern about 3 feet away from where this creature was in the woods. When I went to pick it up, I thought it was a can from a hiker until I got within about 5 inches of it, and then I realized that it wasn't. So I threw it in the thermal blanket and wrapped it up and brought it home. Very unusual shape. Its thickness varies from one end to the other. It's almost like a molded piece of sculpture. There seem to be no seams on it. The attachment of the black surface could not be determined on how it was attached. In a moment, you'll see a close-up of the black material, and it almost has a spider web look to it in layers. As you're sitting here watching this, I just want you to keep thinking one thought. If this happened to you, everything that you know that's happened to me, what would you do? Here's your close-up. You can see the spheres that are penetrated by each of the gold pins. and the black matrix surface that surrounds them. Underneath the matrix surface were little pouches of fluid, some kind of fluid that ran at different angles to different points of the cuff. The pins had no hole in them, so I'm assuming it was nothing to be let out or taken in, but probably part of the circuitry. I don't have that information. Somebody asked when I placed this on the arm of the creature, which I fondly took to call him Freddy, if the pins penetrated the suit. Yes, they did, into the arm. As far as I could determine, it clamped closed around the arm and turned instantly black. Pardon? I believe this is what people are looking for. Someone asked, is this what they're after? I'm sorry, I can't hear your question.
Can we wait until we're at question and answer, please? And then we can bring people up to the microphone. You all have great questions. We just want everyone to be able to hear them.
Again, you can see the emerald spheres. Make some nice earrings. They'd be unique, I'll give you that.
All the properties and the abilities of the Link artifact aren't known, even by the Alliance. There's still a lot of questions to be asked by them and others as to exactly what other properties, what other things this artifact can do.
It's thought that this interface with the wearer is also connected to another piece of, shall we say, hardware, possibly the obelisk, possibly something else. So it takes a combination of devices and consciousness to probably activate this. Not at this time. Are you volunteering to try it? Anyway, this is what I found, and this is what I think they're after. And I will say it one more time. I do not have it. I do not know how to get it at this time. I have one contact that contacts someone else, that contacts someone else, that contacts someone else, and maybe, under the right circumstances, I can get it back. But I do not want it back in fear of losing it and losing everything.
Good.
It's just about over.
I wanted to say something about the samples that were taken by Mr. Chacon. Shortly after the Art Bell interview, he was threatened and has left the country. But he told us that he will publish the report.
I took blood samples and tissue samples from Freddie when I did the exam. And we went on Art Bell December 9th and basically exposed this information with a lot of other information. As soon as that happened, as soon as we were on that show, these people were threatened. My landlord of my old house went on that show and told what he saw in my house after it was torn apart. 3 days later, he was beat up by 3 men. This man is not a violent man. He has never had a problem in his life. Mr. Chacon was threatened.
I want you to ask yourself something. I want you to take the word sources and replace that word with human lives. You all have friends, you all have families, people you love and care about. Would you give them up? Would you surrender them to all these vultures?
You know, I'm here not to convince anyone. In fact, if I had this to do over again, I would have never done it like I did. I would have left this thing and walked away and pretended I never saw it, because it's ruined my life. I have nothing left. I am dealing with the only things I can handle, which is a day-to-day circumstance. I'm trying to keep some dignity in my life, and people keep taking it away. I have a right to tell what happened to me, and no one can take that away. And I will tell my story. And you have a right to know that this stuff is going on, and you're being told that it isn't. And it's not right. And I appreciate the fact that people have given me an opportunity to talk about it. Thank you.
I want to thank people that have made this a safe haven. People like Rob Baldwin and Sean Atlanti. I'm sure you all know these wonderful people, and the Browns. Extra security was put in place, and everybody that we've met that knew who we were kept an eye on our back and made us feel as safe as they possibly could. To each and every one of you and to each and every one of those, God bless you. Thank you very much for that. Before we
for those of you who don't know, we've just published the story of the event, all of the happenings from day 1 through day 9 when the government came in and took the body in the freezer from Jonathan's house. Robert has been wonderfully good in putting together the personality and the character of Gary and Dolly, so you'll have an opportunity to find and meet these people in book form. I encourage you to please come and get a copy of it. There's so much more that you haven't heard that you really would like to. And at the present time, this is Jonathan's only source of income. So thank you for those who have and for those who would like to. After the presentation, we'll have a signing, and they'll both sign it for you. In the meantime, just prior to their questions, there is a statement that I want to read. Recently, during an interview, some pertinent information was assembled by a third and fourth party. This was released before Dr. Reed had an opportunity to review it. Unfortunately, some of this information was incorrect. We would like to clarify this misunderstanding in the statement. However, there have been others who have had similar situations to this where information was released. It's been twisted, it's wrongly used. Jonathan's been slandered and maliciously attacked. And in an attempt to stop this story from being told, there are powers that don't want you to know what's going on. They're trying to disallow you to witness the event through our eyes. We ask you only this, that you decide for yourself after having heard his story, seen the videos, the pictures, and the evidence, and we hope that the UFO community, through your own intelligence, will come to your own conclusions and not accept these poor attempts to assassinate him. Thank you.
I'd like to ask, before the questions begin, if he's in the auditorium here, Dr. Hine to come forward. There he is. To give some information and incredible data. No problem.
Take a deep breath, folks. There are pictures in the back of the book. We have photographs of Susie, so you all can get up close and personal with her. For all of you... Also, I'll let you know, I went to Vancouver and saw Jonathan 2 weeks after the event took place. I saw the what do you call it, little shaft that drains the fluid from the shunt. That's called a shunt, was put in to drain the fluid from the wound because it entered in through the shoulder and exited out through the back part of that shoulder. He was constantly having to change the wound, the bandage.
So now I have a place to put my pen. We went up to the question was what happened to the obelisk. Obviously I didn't drag it home, it wouldn't move. But my friend and I went back the next day. My friend was very determined. We took a trailer and chains. But he was thinking in the right direction. When we got there was nothing there. But there was nothing out of place. The ferns and the bushes that I pulled out of the way to take those pictures with a stick looked like they'd been replanted. It was pristine.
Are we ready for that video? Thank you. After the video, I'd like to hear from the doctor.
Cut the lights, please.
This is my shoulder, my left shoulder. It entered right above the collarbone and exited through my back in 3 places. I found the shell on the ground. It was a 9mm shell. I do not believe that the gun was meant to fire. I believe that it fired because I grabbed it. The look on the fellow's face was quite startling when it went off. I thought it had missed me. And I laid on the ground and somebody came running over.
Lights, please.
And said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine, I'm fine." He said, "No, you're not. There's blood all over you." And I didn't even know I had been shot. that in itself is a very small piece of this puzzle that I have been through. People have said, gee, I wish I had that experience. Well, I'll tell you, I'd trade places with you any time. Because since that day, my life is gone. Everything that I knew prior to that is gone. My job, my friends, my bank accounts, my social security number, everything. And why? Because I saw something? Because I didn't turn it over to somebody who told me to turn it over? Because people came to my house and said, you didn't see anything, Jonathan. And if you have anything, you best give it to us, because the next people that come won't be so kind. And I told them to get out of my house. And I said, I'm going to call the police. They said, go ahead, they're with us. And they were. They were sitting out in front of my house. Now, this is a hard lesson to take. I was brought up to believe different things happen in this country. But my rights have been totally taken away from me. And all I ask is that people open their minds and understand that this stuff may be going on to some of us. Maybe not you, maybe not your neighbor, but I know it's going on to hundreds of people in this country and other countries. I know there is a very dark force that is suppressing this information. I know that there is a lot of information that a few of us, not me, I know very little. But there are a few people who know a great deal, and we need to listen to them. And we need to realize that not everything that we've always been told is true. And that not everyone who stands in this room stands for the truth and the freedom of information. And there are a couple of people in this room that I know that work for the government, that posture as normal people, that stand there and try to emulate one of the rest of us. And those people know who they are, don't they? But we need to realize this. We need to know that those people are with us. Where am I? After I brought this thing home, I went in my house and I tried to regain some composure. And I tried to think this through. I tried to find some kind of rational logic to deal with what I was experiencing. Had I gone through shock? Had my dog been killed by something that I just did not want to wrap my mind around? Possibly. And after a while, that's what I started to believe. I started to believe that maybe my mind had totally invented this whole thing, and that wrapped in my thermal blanket was my dog. And I got to the point where I had to check. I had to go back and look. So I went out of my house and I walked to where I had put this thing, which was in my freezer in my garage. And as odd as that may sound, where would you put this thing? And I opened my freezer and I laid this out on the floor, and it wasn't my dog. And I brought this thing in my house and laid it on the floor and videotaped it. And we have that videotape, and we can show that now.
Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell from the Kingdom of Nye.
It is indeed my guest, Dr. Jonathan Reed, Robert Wraith, and Dr. Harold Chacon, a microbiologist. And once again, so that you know, reading from what was sent to me, Dr. Chacon is a degreed microbiologist graduating with honors from Catholic University of Puerto Rico with a BS Master's Program Certificate in the field of microbiology, biomedical research and cell immunology, biochemistry, and zoology, currently studying and residing here in the U.S. And I'm not going to run my commercial break now. We're going to go directly back to our guest. And Doctor, if you would continue, please. The tissue sample, you said, was not, had similarities to, but was in fact not human.
Not human. Okay, it was about 3 millimeters in thickness, very, very fibrous consistency, and the surface was kind of like grayish brown.
Really?
Extremely transparent, much more transparent than human skin, much more.
Okay.
There was no signs of any hair or hair follicles within the surface of the cell structure. Absolutely no signs of it. We found some subcutaneous tissue, that's the one that is under the surface, and that one has some sebaceous-like glands. Those are the glands that produce usually fat, but half as many as we found in the human skin.
Half as many.
Half as many.
All right. Are any of these findings consistent with any other living mammals on Earth that you know? No?
No. Probably the one that could be most related, probably, in some ways, not completely, could be the reptile.
Reptile.
But not completely.
But enough difference so it definitely was not earthly reptilian.
No, it's not an earthly reptile.
So you're telling me this is tissue from a creature from other than Earth?
From, I don't know, because this is a tissue sample from nothing that we have any data collected on Earth.
All right. You also received a blood sample, or what we are calling blood.
What we used to call, exactly, blood. Besides that one, besides that skin tissue sample, we have another muscle sample too.
A muscle sample?
It was, attached to it. The muscle is connected to this layer of skin, which resembles, this muscle resembles what is called the occipital frontalis muscle. In humans, it's called tissue. It resembles, but it was kind of yellowish pink in color. In humans, it's usually red. This one didn't have that red color. In closer examination, there was another smaller, fine muscle that was intersecting this occipital muscle, resembling what is called the temporal fascia muscle. In the humans, the two are connected. And it was connected by tendinous and fatty fibrous tissue. That was similar to humans.
Well, I just want to be very clear for the audience that what we are describing here, the tissue, even the muscle sample, is close to in some respects, but different enough to be called absolutely non-human.
Oh yeah, completely.
Absolutely. All right.
Human.
All right. Now, on to the blood, or what we call the blood.
Okay, there's a sample that we call, at that time we call it the blood. This was really interesting. The sample was dried. When you put it through the freezing, you put it into contact with really low temperatures. Usually liquid tissue, because blood is considered a liquid tissue. They get really dry, and we have to rehydrate that tissue again. We rehydrate the tissue with saline solution, and at that time we're gonna be able to study the cells and if they're different. The general findings when we tested it reveal a level of oxygen and carbon dioxide and nitrogen-based gases, but with a slight difference. In this case, there was a high copper sulfate traces.
Copper sulfate?
Yeah, copper sulfate, really high traces of that.
Copper sulfate?
Yeah. The copper sulfate traces, there were white and red-black corpuscles what they call corpuscles with elongated nucleus.
I want to stop you for just a second and remind my audience that in a recent significant interview we did on animal mutilations, they found missing from the cows what? Copper. The copper content, I think in the liver, if I'm remembering correctly, was almost entirely missing. And it just keyed when you said that to me. Fascinating. So, anyway, continue, please.
Okay, when we keep sampling and testing it, we look for chromosomes because we're actually working with red blood cells.
Yes.
And we're looking for more specific proofs and findings. And when we did the chromosome study, it revealed that the red blood cells, or what we could be resembling red blood cells, they have a chromosome count of 46, exactly as human.
Okay.
This is very human. We have 46 chromosomes too. But what is really, really, really astonishing is that 9 of those 46 chromosomes are not human.
9 are not human?
9 are not human, but they're only found in dolphins and some aquatic sea tortoises.
But these 9 chromosomes are found in dolphins and some aquatic sea tortoises?
Yes. This is the only data that we have that resemble this type of chromosome that we found in this blood.
Is there any way that you can imagine that any creature that we know of could carry such a chromosome structure?
No, that is unique. We check catalogs in many universities, and we went through a lot of data and trying to find some relationships between these scientific findings with any animal that we know, that science actually knows in our planet, and we couldn't find any way to fit it.
I would like to take some calls from the public and let them ask you questions if you're up for that. Sure. Is there any part of the story you want to get in that we have missed?
Well, just that this is an ongoing struggle to try to deal with just me wanting to tell a story. You know, something happened to me, and isn't it interesting that if none of this is true, why do people keep, driving us off the road, taking the things that I have? All right, we also lost pictures off of the website. Now, something to note here. This website is independently run and owned, not by Robert or myself.
Right.
It is done by another gentleman who is just a fabulous computer guy. We call him Web Author, Cole the Web Author. Without him, we would not be worldwide, just like yourself, Art. But this website has told people their story. The whole story is up there of what happened in chronological order. But we had pictures, similar pictures to what you have, but different pictures, more pictures. People took them and stole them off the web, reproduced them, and somebody called me who was visiting Italy and said, did you know these pictures are being distributed in a booklet?
I'm sorry to say it's not that unusual on the web. People steal things all the time.
But what was interesting, Art, is what the text said that was with the pictures.
And what was that?
They said that Robert and I were living high on the hog outside of London laughing at everyone.
Oh, really?
Absolutely absurd.
Actually, you've been on the run, and a lucrative medical practice you had is all way gone, right?
That's for sure.
And let me tell you, too, something. I think one of the reasons that you get a very angry reaction to your story is because it's so well documented. In other words, most stories of this kind are just sort of told, and you've got to believe this, you've got to believe a description, you've got to believe this or that. With your story, you've got photographs, you've got physical evidence, you've got witnesses, you've got a lot, and so it's such a strong story that for those who don't believe in this sort of thing, they get angry.
Absolutely serious, because when Braxton has fumes, what was that fax that came over your show the other day when Richard was on your show about, well, this can't be real feel Richard has too much information.
Yeah, that's another thing.
Absolutely asinine.
That's another thing. You put a photograph up on the website of a UFO, and a lot of times people take pictures of UFOs that do come out blurry because they're scared, they're in shock, you know, they don't get a good photograph. Well, in your case, you got very clear photographs, and so what's the complaint? What's the bitch? They're too clear.
Hey, I want to say something. In reality, though, we have had 90% positive, reinforcing support from thousands, I mean thousands of emailers and your listeners, Art. We have dedicated the book to you and your listeners.
Oh, I didn't know that.
For them and yourself helping us to get this information out. Without you and them, I would have never done this. I would have found a rock and crawled under for good.
Oh, west of the Rockies, you're on there with Dr. Reed and Robert Ray Fine.
Yeah, hi, Art. Still here.
Bill, you too must yell at us. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I just turned off my TV. I can understand why there's problems with people believing these gentlemen. It's because there's enough evidence for people to attack or to accept.
Yep.
And that allows for people with either beliefs or disbeliefs on this subject to support that kind of thinking. I just want to know what he thinks he understands as a result of this that makes it meaningful to risk his life and the lives of others to go public.
All right, that's a decent enough question. And really, Doctor, it's right. You could have shut up about all of this and gone on with life. What was so compelling about it that made you decide to go public?
Two of my friends who were involved with me during these 9 days, I thought were both dead. One of them is, I found this wonderful woman that was like a second mother to me. I found her dead after 3 hours earlier speaking to her. She was holding material, some of my evidence for me, and I found her dead in her kitchen.
Tearing my house apart and leaving it a total wreck, to completely moving me out of my office where I worked. I had one of my co-workers call me one day during this 9-day episode and say, "Jonathan, I didn't know you were moving your office." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, there's men here right now with hand trucks taking out all your files. They're boxing everything up." And a few hours later, I called on the phone and asked if I could speak to Jonathan Reed. And they told me there was no Jonathan Reed on staff. I want you to know that this gentleman had not seen the presentation, and after meeting me and speaking to me for about 15 minutes, offered me $10,000 in cash.
I did. I felt like that, based on his story, and then we talked for 15 minutes there the first day, March 8th, and then later on that evening we talked again for perhaps about 4 hours, and he was just so gracious in answering my questions, and I know he's been asked these questions a million times, and he never faltered. He always answered my questions very patiently, and I was intrigued that that this guy I just knew he was being honest about this. I hadn't seen the video. I did see the website information, though, so I was pretty interested in that. But in any case, he's correct. I did do that, and he didn't take it. He said he could not take the money. He appreciated the offer, but that's not what this is about. And he's really in this to get the truth out, and that's another reason why I joined him to help him to do this, because I feel like the truth of this is he wants the truth to get out. It's not about money. The media wants to make it about money. The other researchers in the field want to say it's about money. The fact is, it's not. And I know, because I've been a part of this. And I know some of the offers that he's been made. And he's turned them all down, including the one I made to him.
There is so much information here that it's overwhelming. And, we get thousands and thousands of emails of support, 99%. But then people ask very intelligent questions. And one of the best things I can tell anyone is read the book. The book has a tremendous amount of information in it, more information than I can tell you in 4 or 5 hours, even though it's very easy read. It's not a textbook. It wasn't written to be a textbook. It was written to show you what I went through during those 9 days. So, again, there's so much information And these guys are helping to bring out all those points.
Okay, we're in a break. And Dr. Reed, are you there?
Yes.
Listen, I did ask earlier. Now, I have abided by the wishes of Robert, and I have not used anything from the videotape, but if you have any audio at all from that videotape at some point.
I have it queued up.
You have,
And now you're speaking of the wood scene with the breathing?
Yes,
That's what I've got queued up.
All right.
Queued it up right after the swearing.
Thank you. Yeah, there were some words in there that could not be repeated on radio.
Right.
All right, everybody stand by. You've got a good, I don't know, about a 5 or 6 minute break. And, yes.
Is this any better? I switched the phone.
Did you hang up the other one?
Yes, I did.
No, actually, your other phone's better if you just stay right into it.
Okay.
The key
I'll
is
go back to the other one.
the key is to stay right into that phone.
Just talk louder.
Don't let it drift away from your chin.
Alrighty.
Excuse me, your mouth. A lot of people sort of let it drop down to their chin. So yeah, I'll switch back to the other one. Stand by, everybody. And the Ozarks. Once again, here I am. Good morning, everybody. My guests are Robert Braith, who originally got my attention by sending me a fax using one of my favorite expressions from Contact, the movie Contact. Said, "Want to take a ride?" That's how it all began. And now, Dr. Jonathan Reed, the man who had the encounter with this creature in the woods in Washington. We've got the photographic proof. If you want to see it, it's up there on the web right now. You're going to also tonight hear some of the audio as well, I just found out. So stand by for that. We'll get back to our guests and resume the story of what happened to Dr. Jonathan Reed in just a moment. Don't go away. How long did you retain custody of this alien body?
10 days.
10 days. On the 10th day, what happened?
Well, I think there needs to be something said prior to that.
All right.
Go ahead.
We had brought this extraterrestrial home in the event to have something done with it. Something so that somebody could put some sense to all of this. I didn't want to kill it, but I did it out of fear. I did it out of frustration for what I had just witnessed. And I felt terrible, and I still do. But I brought it home, I saved it, I put it in the freezer. We went through the process of trying to find out what to do, and who to go, and who to talk to. And no one would believe us. No one would believe the seriousness of this.
You mean among your friends or?
Among some of the professionals that I talked with.
The UFO people, or?
Yes, I talked to several people through the university. I talked to a professor that I knew specifically as a friend. I tried to set up meetings with him. Things started to happen. He told me he would come and look. I then received a phone call several hours later, and this was predetermined that he would come over and look at this. All of a sudden, his tone changed. He canceled the appointment. No reason given. This started to happen one after the other. Then we realized there were people watching the house.
Dr. Reed, at that point, hold on, please. All right. Dr. Jonathan Reed is the man you're listening to at the moment. Robert Wraith is here, and so is Whitley Strieber. I'm Art Bell, and this is Coast to Coast AM. All right, back now to our guests, Robert Wraith, Dr. Jonathan Reed, and Whitley Strieber. Gentlemen, welcome back. I want to ask one quick question of you, Doctor, and you, Robert. The 3 photographs that I now possess that I put on the website, not everybody has a computer, and we have a newsletter that we publish. We have put your copyright, your name on these photographs. Would you give us permission to put these in the newsletter as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, gentlemen. All right. Your house, Doctor, you become aware, is being watched.
Being watched. It seems like every time we have made arrangements to go anywhere, we're being followed. This escalated to a degree where we both became very paranoid, and also it became dangerous.
In what sense?
Well, we almost got run off the road twice by, a vehicle, a big dark blue van.
Mm-hmm.
The incident that before the break, I was trying to say, is that after we did the topical examination, and I made the video, a few days went by where we started to set up some appointments to do another examination with like I said, another professor, so that I could make some choices on what to do.
Sure.
When some of those arrangements were canceled, I was very frustrated. I was angry. And in preparing for that, I had put a table out and, a place to do this examination.
Sure.
At that point, I put everything away and was closing things down in my garage when I noticed a sound coming from what I thought was underneath my freezer. A thump sound.
Oh, boy.
I thought it was the compressor going out.
Right.
And I thought, if this happens, I'm going to be stripping my refrigerator and putting this in there. Where I thought it was rats.
God, it sounds like something from Alfred Hitchcock. All right.
I'm telling you, this is chilling. It's really chilling.
At that point, I went to investigate. I found that there wasn't any rats and the compressor seemed to be okay. I heard sounds and I opened the freezer, and Freddy, which is what we took to calling him, was not dead.
What?
He was still alive and moving and screaming.
At this point, I'd be screaming.
I slammed the freezer, ran into the house.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Do you have that audio handy?
Yeah, oh, yeah. Now, this is audio from the totality of the videotape runs about how long, gentlemen?
About 6 minutes in each segment.
So, Doctor, when did you hear that scream?
Well, after a few hours had gone by and I had called Gary back, and he had calmed me down from crawling practically around the ceiling. We both went out to look again, and I figured, we went out and looked. We did the same thing. I opened the freezer so that I could know that I was not imagining this. And the same thing happened. And when the freezer was opened, this thing let out a scream
like I have never heard before. It literally, the force of the sound made you feel like something was pushing against your chest.
The air around it as it screams actually bubbles and moves.
It felt like the air was moving. And at that time, it was just, open and closed. And later on, I felt like I had to try to document this.
Of course.
So I took my camera and I took the recorder and I turned it on and I again opened the freezer, and that's when I recorded this sound.
Would you play the sound for us once again, please?
Yes, I will. Hold on.
Okay, here it comes. Oh my God, that's awful. Oh God, that's awful. How did you stay dry?
I didn't. Extraterrestrial screaming, opening the freezer and closing the freezer.
You must have a good, strong heart, Doctor.
Naturally,
that longer.
That wasn't taken the first time he had gone out there.
No, that was done later.
To check when for something that's in the freezer. That was done later as Jonathan actually attempted to communicate with the alien.
Oh, you did?
Well, I attempted to see if it was still alive.
So now you've got a live alien with a terrible head wound in your freezer, which has apparently come back to life, or maybe it never died, hard to say which.
Well, obviously it didn't die.
Yeah, obviously it didn't die. And obviously the freezer didn't kill it.
Well, that's kind of a mystery. I would have assumed that without, an excessive amount of air and the freezing temperature that it would have...
If it wasn't dead, it would be dead.
But I did notice during the examination that the tissue had changed around the wound. It seemed almost like it had adhered back in position. Now, I took that for just the way things freeze. When you freeze something that is wet, it sticks.
The freezer was actually, for some reason, the elements of the environment were somehow conducive to its healing. Somehow it was...
Hey, I don't have all the answers.
Yeah, but somehow it was allowing this creature to heal. And there's no way of understanding exactly how that could be, or what it really means.
Right. I'm speechless, frankly.
Yeah, so am I. All right, so the last time, this is something the police would ask. When was the last time you saw this creature?
9 days from the date that I encountered it to the date that I no longer had it.
All right, then I'm wrong. I'm not understanding the timeline. Tell me how many days it was when you opened the freezer and this alien was alive.
3.5 days.
3.5 days. 3.5 days. And so you closed...
I had taken it out of the freezer several times during that time.
I understand.
Okay, doing the examination and put it back in and wrapped it back up.
I can imagine that. And then from the time that it apparently reanimated, I'll use that term, and you slammed the freezer shut and locked it, there were, about how many more days elapsed?
Well, it was a total of about 3.5 days to that point.
Okay, did you open it again, or did you?
Yes, I did.
You did?
Yes, I did.
And what did you observe?
Well, I observed that it in fact was still moving, but very quietly, not as fast, very, very slow, that it seemed to be injured.
it wasn't, in good shape.
Not after being in the freezer that long.
Well, or hit on the head.
Or hit on the head, right.
But it was alive. And that is about the time when other things started happening, which eventually I lost control of the body.
Okay, how did the body come up missing? When did you suddenly realize it was missing? What circumstances can you tell us about?
Well, during the time when all this was going on, there was a lot happening. We were trying to make some logistics to move different pieces of evidence, to secure them in different areas, because I was under the assumption that somebody had been through the house. And at that point, I didn't trust anything. So I divided the evidence into different groups and placed them in what I felt was secure places. Later on.
The evidence, what do you mean?
Photographic evidence. I had different, some of the evidence which Art has. I had some other videotapes of the creature in the garage moving alive, which I no longer have.
Doctor, you're lucky to be alive. Did you ever attempt to remove this creature's clothing?
During the second examination, which I made with my friend, we went over the body very, very carefully. And I documented everything. We photographed it.
Did you remove the clothing, the black clothing?
We attempted to. And in doing so, I used an X-Acto knife and made a slice in the material.
Right.
And the material almost liquefied as I cut it and rejoined itself.
Oh, my.
There was a point where he went to cut it again, and it was a longer cut, and then again it came together, and then on the third time, it just disallowed him cutting it at all. Part of the clothing had actually adhered to the knife and just wouldn't let him cut it.
What you're about to hear, Reed claims, took place in October of 1996, during the period of time in which he had the creature in his possession. Reed claims that at one point he went out into his garage, opened the freezer that he had this creature stored in, which was a horizontal freezer, and discovered that the creature was still alive. Later, he decided that he wanted to try to record an attempted communication between himself and this creature. So he took a recording device out to his garage, opened the freezer, allowed the creature to come out, and then he made attempts to communicate to the creature, to give it water, to offer it food, and to basically try to keep it calm. So what you're about to hear is that recorded communication.
Just gonna sit there. It's okay. No, calm down. Calm down. Not gonna do anything. It's okay. It's okay. It's alright. I'm not gonna move. Okay? No one is gonna hurt you anymore. I won't hurt you anymore. Promise. Want some more water? Let me give you some more water. Go. Go. Okay. Like that. Good. Yeah. Kind of like that. Okay. Show me what you were using the phone. No, okay, it's alright. It's alright. No!
Please. Okay. No more. I don't know what you want. Do you want to leave? Do you want to not be in the freezer? Okay. All right. Whatever you want. I'm trying to get some help. But I don't know what you want. Make me understand. Maybe you can help me understand. It's alright. Calm down. I'm not gonna hurt you. No, I am not gonna hurt you anymore. I am not, I promise. I am not gonna hurt you. That's it. I am not gonna hurt you. It's okay. Alright. It's okay. I don't know what you mean. I don't know what this means. Water? You want more water? It's alright. Calm down. No, it's too much. Please, stop. It hurts my head. It hurts. Yes. I don't know what you mean. Okay. It's alright. I'm not gonna hurt you. It's okay. You can go back in, just whatever you, it's alright. It's alright. Okay. Alright. Okay. Alright. I'm just gonna pick this up. I'm just gonna pick it up. I'm gonna leave. It's okay. It's alright. I'm gonna go. Alright. I'm gonna turn it off. Alright, I won't. I'm just gonna walk over here. I'm gonna go. Okay. It's alright.
At that point, I made a trip to secure some of the last photographs that I had taken to another location, and at that point I drove back home, and as I drove home I realized that there were 3 vans in front of my house, and people were going into my house. I continued and never stopped, and came back a day later to find my house ransacked. And there were holes in the floor. There were holes in the walls. They had gone through everything that I had. They had taken all the evidence that I had at my house. And I walked to the garage and opened the door, which had been removed from the hinges, set aside. And I walked in and the freezer was gone.
The entire freezer?
The entire freezer was gone.
Lord. And so that's
the last time
you saw the creature.
I saw anything to do with that.
And so, did you call the police?
Considering everything that had been happened, and I had talked with our policeman a few days earlier. That was a futile effort. They didn't believe anything, little green men.
You say you spoke with Peter Davenport, and I spoke briefly.
Actually, Gary spoke with Peter Davenport.
Gary spoke with Peter Davenport. All right. And when he spoke with him, can you recall about when that was?
Well, it was about 2 days after we had brought it home.
So let's see. The original.
It was about the 17th.
About the 17th. All right.
Now, I know at that time, Gary did not give his name, but he did inquire about what if, what would you recommend doing? I think the information given was, if it's real, you need to contact the authorities, you need to contact, somebody who can come down and do this and look at this. Mm-hmm. We were both doing things at the same time. I was talking to other people through different means, different people through the university, trying to get somebody to come and look. But like I said, the doors were being closed as fast as we were opening.
Mm-hmm. I understand. All right. This is just an amazing story, and I think that from here, if you are willing to have the negatives examined, and you say you are.
Yes, we've I have gone through this process before, and I will provide the evidence under the right circumstances.
All right.
I have had 3/4 of the evidence taken from me, lost. What I had left is very little in comparison to what I had. This is one of the reasons I'm talking with you.
I understand, to get this on the record. Well, what we have won't go away, that's for darn sure. Whitley,
when we examine the Community Foundation does work like this, the evidence is so sensitive. The witness comes with the evidence and is there the whole time.
So we will arrange through Whitley, through Peter Davenport, move on through other organizations. We have lots of resources. Doctor, we will contact you. We will contact Robert Wraith, and I guess you're somewhat incommunicado for obvious reasons, and we can contact you through Robert. Is that correct?
Yes.
Whitley, anything else?
Only that it's a very interesting and extraordinary story, one that deserves another program, and we need to put our heads together and figure out exactly what else we want to ask the doctor, because there are
other questions.
Those points,
yes, I agree.
Not been covered.
I absolutely agree. Gentlemen.
Their agenda is to basically keep everyone fractured from information and from any kind of harmony within our lives and our social aspect of our lives. That agenda translates into other issues, including greed, opportunity, aggressive actions that keep, shall we say, that keep people from coming together on issues. In the past, long ago, we would socialize around the church. We would come together in groups and do our praying and our socialization with two different aspects. One for the ability to deal with spirituality within our own religions, and then the other one was basically to come together as community members to support the community effort. Well, I personally believe that a lot of that has been lost. The ability to come together and help and harmonize within each other. But there's one other aspect, and I'd just like to touch upon it, is I think the day has come where more people realize the truth in regard to that we've been visited and we are being visited than those who don't believe it. I think more people are aware, but there still is a fear factor. Anytime you don't have information, anytime you're kept away from those who can give you a better education on things, the result is fear, the absence of information. And we still are living within those boundaries in some regard, some respect, because the amount of people who have actually listened to those of us who have had contact is a fairly small percentage of the overall populace of the whole Earth. And I believe that it's spreading. This information is spreading quickly. People are coming together, talking more and more about the true aspect of our lives and our lives intermingling with extraterrestrial life. I think we are beginning to assimilate those ideas into our culture, which makes us stronger as a whole, as a species. But there's a lot more information that people don't know, and we need to educate them. We need to find ways to bring people out of the fear, out of the darkness, and to let them know it's okay to not know something, at the same time to give them the tools to learn for themselves.
First documentary shot in May 9th to be exact. After we shot that documentary, some things happened. Can we go into that? What transpired after our first meeting?
Well, it's something that I've been reluctant to talk about, but I will talk about it. At least get it on the record for this time. Over the years, I've been pursued by some pretty bad people who seriously have tried every way possible to silence me and this information from coming out. They've done everything except kill me. After we did the interview together and a few days went by, I traveled to Europe to talk to some people in regard to a conference that I was hoping to attend in Switzerland. And basically what transpired is they set out to kill me. They set out to assassinate me in a fire in a hotel. I was locked in a room within the hotel. The hotel was set on fire, and I barely escaped alive. Now, I won't physically give you the details of how I got out, but I will tell you that for months, for 4 months, it was very difficult. I had a lot of medical problems. I was burned. Inside of my lungs were burned. I've had lung clots because of it. I've suffered some minor heart attacks because of this. Your pulmonary system, your breathing system, basically affects your entire body. So when my lungs were damaged, it basically damaged my entire circulation and breathing and immune system. So for the last, from the time this happened until about 4 months after, I was literally in and out of the hospital weekly, and sometimes for months at a time. I believe that this was intentionally done. We have located the people who planned and perpetrated this. And those people have basically been taken care of. Authorities were contacted in some respects. They helped to handle this circumstance and to legally take care of some of the aspects of this. But what we found out after this had happened was the lines drawn back to the original planners, that they were involved with several sub-governments, some agencies that many times people say are involved in black ops or dark operations or illegal operations. And it's what most of us have always known, that there is an apparatus set up to basically squash any information and its validity, to basically target those people who are willing to come forward and talk about what they know. Now, this has happened for years and years during all the time that I have been talking with people, but never this severe to me personally. But there came a time where I think the information that I was talking about and revealing publicly around the world was noticed to be damaging and basically outing some of these people that have been giving and perpetrating the disinformation. I think it got too close to home. So they just decided they had an opportunity to take me out, and that's exactly what they set out to do. And they almost were successful. My feelings about it is anger, of course, frustration for, having been laid up for 4 months, basically 4 months of my life being gone. It's been very difficult on my friends and my team to be able to deal with this situation when for approximately 2 months they didn't know if I was going to survive it. We put a lot of things on hold because of necessity. The public who writes letters to us and to me didn't get their email answered for a few months because we were in the process of trying to understand where this attack came from, who initiated it, and who was to blame. So for that, I apologize to people who were asking questions and wanted to know why I wasn't answering, but I wasn't able to. I was either in a coma half the time, and all those around you and your family. And it's a war. It's a war that I've had to learn to wage for 13 years. This isn't fun. This isn't something I chose to do. Every step of the way I've said, help me, take this away from me, somebody else do it. I sat in Laughlin the very first time I was there in 2000 and said, I'm here because I need help, please help me. And 90% of the supposedly cream of the crop researchers ran away and wanted to tar and feather me and run me out of town because I was taking their spotlight.
This is what so many people tried to say doesn't exist, or simply is a figment of someone's imagination. It has symbols across the front of it. This is what I found in the forest in 1996 when I first encountered the creature, or the alien. I believe that it's some kind of bioelectric interface between the wearer of this device and the owners of it, that they actually activated. It has 3 needles on the inside that actually penetrate your arm, the wearer of this, that I think creates a interface, biological interface, with the device and/or the beings who use it. So my impression of it is that it's designed to keep control and communication between the extraterrestrial and their superiors. I believe it fits on your arm, the wearer's arm, like this. If you push down, the needles penetrate your skin, tissue, into the nerves of your arm. There is some pain to it, but it quickly goes away. It becomes kind of a cold, almost a frozen type feeling. Very quickly that pain subsides, but if it functions, which sometimes it doesn't, it starts a throbbing inside your chest, literally a pulsation inside your chest that starts from the center and emanates to your extremities and becomes harder and harder. And then when that happens, then it starts to be activated by there. Now I can feel it. I can feel it in my chest. It's painful, but if I hold my chest, it has a tendency to be less painful. And then they make the decision whether
Thank you.